Hi, my name is Taylor Oren, and welcome to an episode of Hashtag Rising Artists. On today's episode, we are talking to Drew Strauss, or better known as Onsen, as we get ready for the release of his new song, Momma Said, which is actually available right now. You can actually listen to this on all streaming platforms. We are currently going to have the link to his Spotify playlist right in this video, as well as in the article that you guys are probably watching this on. So, without further ado, I actually had the opportunity to chat with him yesterday. So, here's a little bit about him through that interview. I should note that because of where I'm at, the signal is kind of shady and sketchy and all that funness. So I tried my best and I was in sheer panic. So please forgive me on how horrible that was. But he was a fantastic person to work with, and I cannot wait to hear you guys' response on his new music. So without further ado, here is a little bit of that interview. All right.
I'm Drew, and my musical project is Onsen, and yeah, I'm really excited to be putting music out again. There's been some downtime with all the craziness happening and sort of the slowing down of the music industry, but it feels good to be talking to people again and putting out music. I live in LA, and my music is. Yeah, I grew up listening to like a lot of Beach Boys and a lot of world music and a lot of like 80s sort of synth music. And so I think my music is a bit of a combination of those things. And it was really fun. This new record that's coming out has of a lot of like more pop and electronic elements than my first record, which was drawing more from a sort of like psych rock and maybe more experimental background. Um, and I'm really excited about this song that's coming out tomorrow called Momma Said. It's sort of a nice like synthesis of those two things. There's a lot of like experimental elements in terms of the rhythm and the sort of like keys of it, but it's got a bit more of that like pop sensibility of some of my newer stuff, and so it feels like a nice like drawing together of some of my older stuff and some of my newer stuff. And there's a lot of like world music influences, which I always think is fun.
Oh, I know it's that you mentioned, or at least that what I've heard in writing and whatnot, that you made a tie between a Greek tragedy uh, mixed into this. Can you spin a little bit on that one? Because I know the song's it's a lovely song. I actually got the chance to hear it pretty much all day today just to get me excited to talk to you about it. But I'm curious in terms of
Cool.
on the whole idea of being a Greek tragedy. I know you had like a couple verses of point of views. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think both sonically and somewhat in terms of the content. I mean, there's a, there's like a narrative like a song is talking about, and was sort of like a reaction to some things that had happened in the world, and it was sort of like a narrative of this like, I was imagining this kid like leaving home or sort of being kicked out of home, and then like going to a big city where, and I was sort of like sadly imagining like more tragedy befalling this person, and where I was coming to the place of like the Greek tragedy. The chorus is this sort of like chorus of voices, like it reminded me of that sort of like classic Greek theater where you have the person who's sort of like, or like the tragedy is occurring to the person while there's this sort of like chorus of voices around them. And that sort of like classical theater format felt a bit like what was going on sonically with it. And also there was sort of like the tale I was telling felt really there's always like an inevitability to Greek tragedies. Like I feel like the audience knows the tragedy that's about to befall almost before they do. And there's a way in which I was like sort of singing like an almost like archetypal queer tragedy of like a runaway and then like a tragedy befalling them in like a when they think that they're sort of like safe, and that was a narrative that I feel like I was seeing either hearing sort of people that I knew stories were just like even in the news. And yeah, and I think it's also like a lot of my music has been like personal. I I ended up talking about like my own heartbreaks or my own like internal workings, and this was um, and in that sense too, I think that like thinking about some of those like forms was sort of to me coming from when I had talked about that before.
Wow. Sorry, apologize for half a second. There's another screen popped up on here. What was it? So you mentioned, I know that you mentioned a bit about pulling information from your past relationships. Um, I know that um, previous songs you touched on a few of them. Um, as for this a new song that's coming out, Mama Said, what was the big inspiration for the song? Apologize, my light makes me look like a ghost
You
for
know,
a
I
second.
think it was sort of like I think it was sort of a slow build. I mean, there was like a you know over the course of several years, there was just like there's even though sort of like gay rights and acceptance have come like an incredibly long way from when I was a kid. There were a series of like really intense like violent acts on you know queer people of different kinds, like including there was an attack on a French gay man who was walking with his boyfriend in Paris, where I grew up half my childhood. That was really like I was living in LA. Pulse had actually like at a gay party that crowd as like news of that event happened, and just like seeing the like dawning realization on people's faces that like it was probably a space pretty similar in some ways to the one that everyone was in, and the sort of like terror that was on people's expression or faces. And I remember even in the like days after that, people being it was right during Pride in LA, and there was a big Pride parade the next day. And I remember, you know, people's parents or people's families being like, "Don't go to the Pride parade. Don't go. It like you're in danger. You know, stay home." And the sort of consensus being like between and all my friends being like, "No, we're gonna go. That's the point. Is not to be
Yeah.
sort of made afraid by these things." And I think the it's not one specific event, but all of these, like a number of
Oh, shoot.
strategies, I found myself like distilling into a sort of narrative, again, like almost archetypal, right? Like it wasn't a specific story, but it felt like an archetype of a type of like queer tragedy. And that those sort of like series of events outside of my experience, but also very much happening to people in my community were sort of the impetus for writing that song.
So I'm curious to know in terms of like, so you have this song, you have Momma Said coming up tomorrow. Any big plans on celebrating the release of this song?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna, shows are starting to happen again. I don't have any in-person shows coming up, although I'm probably gonna do um, a streaming show that I think's on. I have to check the date, but I think it's the 28th of June, and then I have the full length record is going to come out at the beginning of July, and that's
Ooh.
the big thing that's happening. It's called Keeper, and there's some really exciting music on there. So this is sort of like the build up to that, and so that's the big thing I'm feeling like really excited about. Um, yeah, and I mean, yeah, that's it.
Ooh, so Keeper's the new album that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
What is there a specific song that you're most excited for the fans to find out about?
Um, I mean, other than the one that's about to come out,
Yeah.
there's two songs that haven't been released that I really love that are on there. One of them is called Moving In. It's the opener of the album, and it's the only time that a song has come to me pretty much fully formed in a dream. I was like in this sort of some kind of like massive room, like almost like a sci-fi like chamber, and there was a glowing light in the middle of it, and I was walking towards it. And as I was walking towards it, like I was sort of repeating this like melody in my head. And then as I like hit the center of this light, I sort of like it felt like I had like entered some type of like, I don't know, infinite space. And it's one of the few times I went to my phone, and then I like immediately passed out. But in the morning I had the voice recording, and I went and I like turned it into this song, and it's like it's more minimal than some of my other stuff. It's like very like chanted, and there's like weird instrumentation. I really love that song. So that's one. And then there's the closer, Already Gone, is really, I really like it too. The outro I really love. It's very like, it's also kind of sparse, but in a different way. I was sort of listening to a lot of like more like plucked, delicate music at the time, and a lot of harp music, like Celtic harp. So that there's some of that stuff going on in that song. But I really like those, and I got to work with this awesome producer named Brooke Delowe. We sort of co-produced some of these songs together, and his sound is on some of those too. So that was a really fun collaboration that I associate with those two songs too.
Ooh. I love that the contrast that you have from the beginning of the song, beginning of this album calling "Moving In," and then the last song being "Are You Gone," which is beautiful as it is. Like just as that as the opener and closer. I'm actually really curious on this album.
Cool. I hope you like it. I think
So far, I mean, at least for the last 4 songs that you released last year, uh, those definitely pumped me up, especially with the release of Tomorrow's Song. Um,
cool.
I noticed on there that you were on Sia's playlist. How did you feel about that?
Stoked. I love her. She's so awesome, and you know, uh, uh, yeah, and putting on one of my songs and like being into it enough to put it on her playlist, I was so flattered. It was a really cool thing, and she's awesome. So thank you, thank you, Sia, wherever you are.
Question, but it's kind of an oddball thing. I do this with as many people I interview as possible. I have this deck of cards that I may have stole from the idea of a YouTuber that I follow a lot. Just gonna give you a question. Pick a random one, see how it works. Okay, this is actually perfect. So, what is something you wouldn't change? You wouldn't want to change about yourself?
I wouldn't want to change about myself.
Yes.
So something that pops into mind. I sort of mentioned this earlier. I got to grow up half my childhood in Paris, and I think that like having that experience of sort of like growing up in two different cultures, and having that sort of like duality was was really just amazing, both in terms of like the kind of influences, in terms of my education, in terms of like the artistic influences I got. That's one thing that I really wouldn't want to change. I feel so lucky that and I also wouldn't change being queer. I really think it's like such an awesome thing to like. I feel like for me, actually, it sort of came around the same time as starting to make music too. Like around the time I was like, well, I'm attracted to guys. I started questioning all kinds of different things, like if the sort of notion that I was going to be door was no longer valid, like what else was no longer valid? Like, and I really around that time started questioning my career, like the way I was living my life, just like these sort of basic tenets of how I'd structured my life. And I really feel like I got to rebuild my world to my own vision. and that was such a gift. I think that without being queer, I never would have started questioning this, and never would have met the community of musicians and artists that I get to be around now. So I feel very lucky in that too.
Well, I'm glad that wasn't. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. There's like pop-ups on my screen.
No worries.
um, but I'm glad to welcome you into the community, and I'm so excited to hear the responses of everybody about your new song, as well as the new album coming out. I
Right on.
congrats on everything and all of your endeavors. I do want to know, to what was it? I do want to have the opportunity to let you say a few words. Where can we find you besides SoundCloud?
Um, Actually, I'm on Spotify under Onsen. You can, I mean, Apple Music, all of the streaming, platforms have my music. Um, yeah. So if you look up Onsen, or you want to list Charming Nights, was the one that you referenced earlier that Sia put on her playlist. I also have a music project called Elio really that's on music. It's me and Nacho Cano from Harmless, and
Okay.
it's kind of like sexy sad music. That's really fun. I don't know if you know his music. His music's great too. Harmless, it's awesome. So yeah, that project together is really cool. But yeah, definitely Spotify and Apple Music are good places to find me. I'm on Instagram if you want to follow my shenanigans, Onsen with little underscores on either side. Um, and yeah, those are some good spots.
And welcome back to the void. That's why I'm going to nickname this until I can figure out what to call this. Thank you so much for watching. And like I mentioned before, you can actually hear more about Onsen's new music down below in the article. Or unless you're watching this on YouTube, then click the link below and it'll take you right to it. With that said, my name is Helen Oren, and if you actually want to know more about Hashtag Magazine, I highly suggest you check out the link below. It allows you to see a bunch of articles, a bunch of new stuff. We do concert footage and reviews and new albums, so we really love to have you come aboard. And with that being said, happy Pride Month, and we'll see you guys later.